All right, well, let's take a few moments to recap where we've been in the Gospel of Matthew. For chapters 5, 6 and 7, we sat at the foot of the mountain under Jesus, looking up at him as he taught about the kingdom. That is, the Sermon on the Mount. It was radical. He's come to make a new humanity, a new kingdom shaped after his own image. And we know what the kingdom is like because we know what the king is like. It's going to be humble, it's going to be peace-giving, holy and inside-out living, radically different to this world. And after Jesus does this teaching, we see a series of 10 miraculous signs in chapters 8 and 9. The authority of Jesus has peeked through as he taught, and now as he does all these miracles again, we're peeking through into eternity of what the new creation will be like. Already we've seen him cleanse the leper, heal the centurion's servant by speaking a word at a distance. He's healed Peter's mother-in-law of a fever. And then he's healed many, one after the other, like a drive-through, over and over and over again, healing. Over and over. The healings are this glimpse into this new creation for eternity, what that will be like. And these miracles we've seen, they're not random events. They're deliberate demonstrations of what Jesus has come to do, who he is. They point at something, they signify. They point to what's going to come soon, his death and resurrection, which will fix the central and essential problem that we all have, sin and death. And he's come to make all things right, all those things that are wrong in this world. He's come to make them right, to heal, restore, reclaim, redeem people and creation. Remember last week the ripples of sin? He's come to undo even those. And by the end of this section in Matthew, we'll see that his authority stretches to every corner of reality. That he has authority over humanity, over spirits, over all created order, visible, invisible things, over life and death, things near and far, over hostility and evil things. He's got authority over time and place and even authority over each one of us as well. And as these things are happening, as his power and his goodness and authority is being revealed, it's being noticed by many. Crowds begin to see him. They begin to really see him. Just like on a foggy morning. You know, you wake up, there's fog everywhere, you can't see far out your window. And as the day goes on, the sun rises, it burns off the fog and you can see clearly what is out there. That's what's happening with the crowds. They see and hear who Jesus really is. And what's surprising we'll see in this passage this morning is Jesus' response to the crowd. He's not after a crowd to follow him. He's after disciples. And he'll warn two would-be disciples about what it is to follow him. He doesn't welcome them straight away. In fact, I think he sends them away. We don't know what happens to these two. We're not told, but from my reading, my best guess, I think these two don't become disciples, at least in this moment. So, Jesus has healed many. Lots of people wanting to get a glimpse. They're trying to get whatever the equivalent of an autograph is back then of Jesus. They're crowding around him. Jesus is on the move. He decides to cross the lake, and I think he can deal with people as people individually, not just a whole crowd. And we read in verse 18, thanks Fiona. When Jesus saw the crowd around him, he gave orders to cross to the other side of the lake so that he can get away. All right, he's wanting to deal with people. Then in verse 19. Then a teacher of the law came to him and said to him, "Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go." So this man wants to follow Jesus, I guess at least across the lake with Jesus. He's probably heard that Jesus is going and wants to keep up with him. This man is a teacher of the law, a leader of Jewish culture and nation. And most of the time we see these teachers of the law, they're hostile, they're in opposition to Jesus. Such fierce opposition, in fact, that they ultimately arrange for Jesus to be executed by Roman authorities. And yet here is a teacher of the law willing to follow Jesus. A willingness to hear from him and listen and follow. He says, I will follow you wherever you go. That's a pretty strong statement, isn't it? It's probably more than just going across the lake for the day. I will follow you wherever you go. I think he acknowledges that Jesus has authority. He's seen what Jesus has done, heard what Jesus has taught, and he thinks he's worthy of being followed. He calls him teacher, which in those days were the highest form of respect. And he doesn't just say, yeah, look, I'll follow you. Notice what he says. I will follow you wherever. I'll do whatever it takes. That key word is wherever. This man's eager and willing, and yet Jesus seems to want to talk him out of following him. Jesus replies in verse 20, foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. That seems a bit of a riddle, doesn't it? Funny answer. Foxes, they can sleep in dens. The birds have their nests, but I've nowhere to put my head. I've got no pillow, no place, no bed. Now, what does that matter to this man? What sort of answer is that? Doesn't seem like much of an answer, is it? Probably walked away scratching his head. But Jesus is saying to this teacher of the law that if you follow me, then you too will have to sacrifice something. Following me is not going to be always easy. Life may not be comfortable. You may not have all the things that are common to others. Following me will mean uncommon sacrifice. It's very uncommon sacrifice. And the key idea here is that the disciple will look like the one that they follow. Jesus will have no place. Disciples will look something like that as well. Jesus is not about the things of this world, of fame and power and status and respect. It's different, isn't he? And to follow him is not about learning to be smart or wise in the ways of this world, but living a life that's radical and different, like what he's just taught on the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus here is more than just another teacher. He's more than just someone who can do miracles and maybe this guy could learn something about it. He's not asking for volunteers to follow along with him. He's looking for people who will give up their life, all of it, in order to gain it. And so Jesus makes it clear to this teacher of the law what he was really asking for. If you're going to follow me, it's going to change everything. You need to count the cost. I think the challenge here is the same for us as well, isn't it? The same for this would-be disciple as it is for us. We're to count the cost of what it is to follow Jesus. To live as a disciple of Jesus is not always a life of luxury and comfort. So a question for you, what has cost you recently in following Jesus? Have you had any cost in following him? I think there are three ways we talk about cost, things costing in our lives. Paul's talked about them. There's money, obviously. There's time. We talk about time costing things. And I think also effort. We put effort in. What comes first for you? Is it your own time? Spending time alone? Is it time off? Holidays? Is it money and new car? Time, money, effort? What have you done lately that's cost your effort? You know, one of the lies of Satan that we tend to believe is that to be a disciple of Jesus means that it doesn't require all that much. You can just go along with things. In fact, sometimes we hear the lie of Satan that I deserve something in return when I give time, money, or effort. We often have that set of scales in our head weighing up the benefit, weighing up that cost of service against what we might gain in some way. Now, I want to make it clear, Jesus is not saying give every single thing you have away. He's not saying you need to serve at church every single second of every single day. That's not what he's saying. But we need to know that Jesus is all that we have. That Jesus comes before everything. That's what Jesus is telling this would-be disciple. Jesus always is first. And then we have another disciple approaching Jesus in verses 21 and 22. And this disciple isn't willing to give up everything as well. In verse 21 it says, "Another disciple said to him, 'Lord, first let me go and bury my father.' But Jesus told him, 'Follow me and let the dead bury their own dead.'" Now that seems a bit of an odd answer, doesn't it? Again, we all know family's important. Death is not something to be ignored at. We've seen this morning, I heard Steve say, church continued as we cared for Marion. That was church, wasn't it? We cared for Marion. It doesn't mean we don't care about physical health. And this is a bit of a funny answer to us, isn't it? Let the dead bury their own dead. God commands us to care for our families, especially our parents. Honour them. And yet Jesus says it's more important to follow him than it is to bury his own father. What does this mean? Well, there's a bit of context to this. It's important to understand the context. This man probably means more than what he says and what we read on first glance. There are a few possibilities to what he means. Our first possibility is that the man's father literally has just died and he needs to go bury him in the next day or so. That's the Jewish custom, to bury someone very quickly. They didn't have refrigeration, and so the body was almost always buried within 24 hours. Now, that's very unlikely in this scenario because the man would be already in the process of burying his father. He wouldn't be out listening to Jesus. Give us an update if you do have one. That'd be great. We'll let everyone know. So this wouldn't be the case that his father has just died, okay? It's unlikely. He would already be arranging and be at the funeral. The second possibility is that this man would need to finish the burial process. The Jews had a custom where they would bury their loved one very quickly in the first day. And then about a year later, most of them would go and collect the bones and put it in a body and put it in what is kind of like a vault, a mausoleum, similar to today in cemeteries. And the third view is that the father isn't even dead yet, that he's elderly, near death. And the man is saying, I want to care for my father first, and when I'm free, then I'll follow you. Now, I'm not sure which of these three options was the case, but it doesn't really matter. That's the point. Jesus knows all about this. He knows this man, he knows his father, and he says, put me first. And the truth behind this statement, I think, from Jesus is that death is real. It is continual, but Jesus gives life. Come and follow me, the one who can give life, who will overcome death. Follow me and I can give you life. Yes, death is bad. It's horrendous. And I've come to overcome it. You know that line? It's one of my favourite lines from Shawshank Redemption. I think it's Morgan Freeman where he says, get busy living or get busy dying. That's the point I think Jesus is saying to this man. Get busy living. I can give you life. Now, the heart of this issue are the first two words of this man's request. He says, should be up there. Go back a verse. He says, Lord, great start. And then he says, first, I want to do something else. This man says Jesus is Lord. That requires all of life obedience. And then he puts a condition on it. Those two words can't go together. Either Jesus is Lord or he's not. So, we have these two disciples with two very different answers. The first man was really eager to follow Jesus, and Jesus said, well, stop, consider the cost. He probably wanted to jump in too quickly. He was right to follow Jesus, but it will cost. The second man was, I think, too slow to follow Jesus. Maybe he valued things on this earth too much. He wasn't willing to count the cost and give it all up. Now, on the outside, these conversations, they seem pretty odd, don't they? Jesus seems pretty strict with these two, rigid. However, it's true. We must realise that Jesus wants us to follow him, and that comes first. It will require a life of sacrifice, a life of continually putting him first. Just as Jesus died for us and put us first by going to the cross, he wants us to follow him and serve him in all things. Jesus requires total and radical devotion. He doesn't want to take second place in your life. And so as we finish, a couple of things to point out. What we can't take away, I've wrestled with this week, what we can't take away from this passage is that God wants us to live a miserable life. Right? The point is that not that God will take everything away. If you're going to follow him, you've got to give everything up. That's not what Jesus is saying, that we're going to end up poor and destitute. That is not what Jesus is saying. In fact, becoming a Christian is the best life. It is life and life to the full. God may not want to take our personal possessions, our friends, our families away from us. He may not want to do that. In fact, you may gain so much more as a follower of Jesus. That's the truth, isn't it? But the point of this passage, I think, is that we have to be willing to leave all that behind to follow Jesus. That's what it is to become a Christian in the first place, isn't it? To let him be Lord of your life. To let God to decide what plans are for you. See, you can't worship Jesus on a part-time basis. It's not a mix and a match where you'll choose certain things. All of our life will grow to be more and more under him. And if you come to him like some of these disciples saying, I'll come, but I'll keep something, I'll give you half, I'll give you a most, then you actually get nothing. There is no such thing as a half-hearted Christian. But if you do offer him everything and continue to offer him everything, we gain all there is in this world and the next. And he may even allow you to use whatever you have now and give you more to use it in service to him. The heart is the willingness. The heart of the issue is the willingness. Jesus wants us to be willing to give everything else up and follow him. He wants our heart, not our stuff. He doesn't need our stuff. And so we're going to sing a song in a minute, a song of response. It's called This Life I Live. It sums up, I think, very clearly what Jesus has been teaching in this passage. We're going to sing it, and I'm going to encourage you to pray this prayer, to continue to pray this in the coming days and weeks. I'm going to have it up on the screen. There's a few verses up there. I'll read it out. This is what you can pray as you sing. This is the words. It says, "This life I live is not my own, for my Redeemer paid the price. He took it. He took my life to be his alone, to be his treasure and his prize. The things of earth I leave behind to live in worship of my King. His is the right to rule my life. Mine is the joy to live for him." How about we sing this and pray this together now?